First up, joining us from a very distant time zone. I believe it's like what 11 p.m. where you
It's
are.
12:26 a.m. right at the moment.
Amazing. But yes, so Zhen Zhou, a creative technologist who enjoys overthinking interactions with games. He likes to build weird controllers, which has been exhibited at alt.ctrl GDC and Tokyo Game Show's Sense of Wonder Night, and is here to talk about physical player interactions outside a digital game. And yeah, I am just excited for you to kick things off.
All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet y'all. It's kind of an honor to be here. It's my first time giving a talk like this, so it's going to be pretty interesting. And yeah. So first slide is basically just about myself. My day job is a human-computer interaction researcher, so like HCI, and I work in a little outfit in the National University of Singapore called the Interactive Materials Lab, little website there. And but I also have made two now alternative control games, and so I guess that kind of establishes me maybe as an alt control game designer. So the two games I made were there's one called Pastry Panic with Cat, where you have a bunch of sliders and you try to bake bread, and if it fails, it gets fed to a cat. And Bark, which is a barcode scanning time crisis like game, but there's also a receipt printing barcodes at you. Yeah, so I'll be going into a bit of, I guess, thinking about physical controller interactions through the lens of alt controls, because that's kind of where I entered this space. And I've been kind of throwing this word out for a while now. But what is alt control? And it stands for alternative control. So basically, it means any game that is. I don't think there's a fixed definition though, but it means any game that is played with a non-conventional controller. So we got no keyboard mouse here, no gamepad here, and the people who make alt controls are basically like this kind of person where there's a perfectly good controller there, but they rather use a plunger. To give some examples of alt control games, or what I would consider alt control games, we have like old arcade games. So the one on the left, you kind of roll a ball and you are an armadillo, so you're rolling the armadillo. In the middle is Police 9112, I believe. And on the right is, I believe, is Thunderblade as a helicopter simulator where you sit on the chair and you look downwards. And by moving the lever, the whole chair actually moves. So there's a bit of a motion rig kind of effect, even though there is no mechanical motion rig there. And following this, I have some alt controls that I've seen over the years. This one is the book ritual, where you kind of talk with this living paper shredder through the screen, and there are lots of books around, and you write stuff in the books. You take pagers, and eventually you shred those pagers as part of kind of a. It's kind of a. I'll call it. It's an interesting kind of therapy experience, which involves shredding like what we normally would consider precious physical items. Um, this one is Line Wobbler. I think this one's pretty famous. It's a one-dimensional dungeon crawler that's played on a single LED strip with a door stopper, I believe, a spring door stopper as the input controller because it wobbles very nicely. And this is Spacebox, where quite literally you are in a spaceship, but your controller is a box. How not to get hit by a self-driving car, where there is a self-driving car person identification algorithm looking at you through the camera, and you try to get to the end of the road without it figuring out that you are a person. This one's Coal Rush. It's a train simulator where rather than shoveling coal, you shovel golf balls which are painted black. And then there's a horn in the corner that you pull to toot the horn of the train. And it's a competitive one, and you basically break your back shoveling fake coal. Ruins Climber. This one is you're climbing ruins as a chicken, and you do so by pulling a towel, like a rope. Actually have a GIF for this one. If it, oh, I guess it's not playing. Never mind, no GIFs. But yeah, you kind of just reeling that downwards, and your chicken goes upwards. And this one is Planet Licker, and it's, as it sounds, there is a controller that you must lick to lick the planets. Where more? Oh yeah. Well, I don't have more, but there's this really wonderful website called shakethatbutton.com, which basically is how should I say, a user contributed catalog of alternative control games that has quite a history, and it has a lot of videos and links. So if any of these interest you, you can kind of take a peek at that. But this is kind of just a little introduction to the wide scope that alt control games can encompass, from things like this different ways of inputting to using cameras and motion detection, and to use something completely physical like the shoveling. And what I really find fascinating about alt control is how, by redesigning the controller of a game, it extends the idea of what actually constitutes a game. So the conventional game experience is more or less about designing the digital aspect, what happens behind the screen. But then when you do alt control design, you are designing the interface, the controller, but sometimes both the display, which controls the input and output from the game. And through that, alt control games can expand into the real world. Suddenly, the game experience that may have been confined to a space just between your hands involves the people around you, the space around you, the condition of your body, how you move. It kind of literally expands the fantasy of the game world to something in our physical space rather than just being on the screen in front of us. So for a little example, imagine that you're playing a little horror game. Please pardon the art. You're playing a little horror game which involves lights turning off and on. But you have a very nice IoT system in your house that lets your computer control your lights. So as you play the game, the lights in your house may turn off one by one, and you need to go and turn them back on. If not, it's kind of like a health bar. But at the same time, while you're away from your screen, maybe there's a monster chasing you or something. There's a ghost there. I don't know. But by using your lights and the entire whole system, suddenly the world of the game has expanded to encompass your entire household, and things like the distance between your screen and the lights, how fast you can run. I don't know, is there anyone else in the house who can help you turn on the lights? All these things become parts of what is the game experience. Thus, when alt control games are developed, considerations like what context the game is being played in, how much space it will take, how does it feel for the person to use or hold the controller? Is it physically possible to do an action? Will anyone want to do the action? Become factors when designing the game. You need to consider the person and how they are playing the game. But like mechanics in the digital part of games, these real-world aspects, which become part of the game, can now be used to design the game experience. For example, you could try to pull in some real-world aspects as balance. Perhaps there's a tangible cost to a certain action, which limits it. So rather than having something like a consumable in an inventory, or a mana bar or a stamina bar, you have a tangible book that you rip, and then now you have no book because it's gone. Or rather than having stamina, you can have your own physical stamina, which limits how much you play the game and how fast you can do actions. Or perhaps you can have a sanity cost by making people do things that they would not normally do, like licking a controller that other people have probably licked before, or shouting in a public space, or doing a silly dance. And so you force people to do these things instead of giving them like a cooldown period for an action. Of course, there's also a semantic aspect to the controller, and this like immersive aspect, all these kinds of other things that are going in. Like how does the way you control an object relate to how does the way you control an object change how you relate to it on the screen? For example, if let's say you're playing Mario, normally Mario you just press you press A to jump. And so you're kind of like a puppeteer for Mario. But if suddenly Mario was voice controlled, then your role becomes a bit of like a drill sergeant instead. You're shouting at this little guy to jump. And so that changes the semantics of the experience and the whole thing kind of. And so alt control design involves recognizing the physical experience of the players interfacing with the controller. But how can this relate back to regular games with regular controllers? And this is maybe just me overthinking things, but I think that there are already many games that take advantage of this. And one genre is fighting games, which is maybe it's a bit unsurprising because fighting games have their roots in the arcade. But specifically in fighting games, what I would like to talk about are motion inputs, the quarter circle forward, quarter circle back, and the things that make it difficult to do certain special moves in the game. There is a very nice YouTube channel called Core A Gaming, which has an amazing video about this topic. So please check it out if you're interested. But just to go through it briefly, a motion input kind of puts a physical cost for a stronger attack, right? And there's this relation because your character is exerting themselves to do a special attack. Therefore, the player should also exert themselves more as a similar cost. That's meant to be a GIF for view with a Hadoken, but no GIFs. And then also, a motion input can put a physical limit on how and when you can use a move. So Gao's Sonic Boom, for example, he needs to hold down or hold backwards to charge it. Therefore, you cannot use this attack while you're moving forward, and it's a physical thing that you just got to deal with. There's another mechanic in fighting games, in this case called burst, it's more or less a combo breaker mechanic that you can do when your opponent is kind of hitting you a lot and you want them to just go away and give you some breathing room. And the input for this controller, for this action, is to press all 4 attack buttons on the controller. So if you see it on cabinet, there are 7 button holes there, but I believe 5 are being used. So pressing 4 buttons is basically like slamming the table. And if you play that on a gamepad, pressing all 4 buttons would be, pressing all 4 face buttons down at the same time. And it really kind of mimics what the character is going through because the character's exerting themselves a lot. Therefore, the pressing all 4 buttons down really gives it the feeling of, get off of me. But to give an example that is a bit closer to home here, since we all roguelike players. Oh, sorry. Got my slides wrong. We talk about gamepad triggers. They've kind of evolved to be more weapon-like. And because of this, the trigger is actually harder and takes more effort to press than just the old button. There's more distance to move. And so while not only being used for FPS and shooting games to give the feeling of a weapon, games like Elden Ring and other action games take the trigger and its longer input as the input for heavy attacks or the skills. Things that would seem to require more effort, require more effort on the player's part. And for things like multi-button inputs, it kind of follows the same rules, right? You press 2 buttons, you get a powerful attack, and more buttons means more power and more effort for the player. And here's the example I think many of us are familiar with, Slay the Spire, and some very nice shivs. And this is indeed a very nice feeling to be in when your hand is just all shivs and you can play it with reckless abandon. But Slay the Spire is on a few platforms now. There's mobile, there's console, and there's PC. And while the game is the same, I believe that this feels superior on a mobile phone because when you're playing your shivs in this state, you're really just flinging. You get to fling the cards out like that, and I think that feels pretty good. So even while the controller is not something that's designed by the creators of the game, in the end, every input the player makes on the controller still has a physical sensation that contributes to the game experience, be it shoveling golf balls or pressing multiple buttons at the same time. And so considering the person behind controlling the controller and being aware of them could lead to perhaps some interesting experiences when designing games, especially when you misuse the controller. Like all the inputs are explained from the game side have been quite sensible. But what happens when you suddenly ask somebody to press, let's say, three mouse buttons together, or slide their finger from 1 to 0 across the keyboard, and they suddenly become aware of the controller? And yeah, well, I think I'm hitting about time, and that's about it. That's about it. That's from me. There's some links here that you can take a look at if you're interested in learning more about alt control. And yeah, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I think we have time for probably one question or so if anyone wants to put one up. But yeah, I think that's really interesting. And it made me think there is a talk from Alex Jaffe about fighting games and player mythology that I think is interesting because basically he talks about how like part of the whole reason that hardcore players of fighting games get into it is they want to live this fantasy of being a like mystical, like the movie tropes of like the mystical form of martial artist, of like you're memorizing all of these kind of esoteric things, and then by physically being able to execute them you can achieve victory over people. And I think that's cool because like you're saying, there is a physical embodied sensation to those types of fighting game inputs. And I know Alex talks about the fact of trying to like simplify those out of fighting games might seem like a good thing, but people don't want it to be simplified because the physical exertion is part of their fantasy of what they like about fighting games. So
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag. Like it does make it a lot more accessible, but at the same time, the motions are what give the game energy, and the motion is part of the game.
yeah,
It's the limiter, right? Like somebody who has practiced a lot gets the reward of being able to do it reliably.
yeah,
Or I would even argue and say that the different motions kind of have different momentum, and it relates to what the character is doing. Like sliding forward, like or quarter circle forward, that has a forward move. Therefore, most of the time is things that sends the player forward. Quarter circle back normally is a bit more reserved. The player doesn't move or they launch a projectile forward. Yeah, and I feel
yeah.
that there's a lot of layers, and I feel it's part of the experience.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. One question yeah, is I wonder if there's a reference you could point people at. It's from Cliff of just how inputs from unusual controllers like shovels get turned into inputs in the computer, which I assume is like a big topic. But is there a place for people to kind of learn a bit about how do you go about being like, I want this shovel to be an input? How do I do
So
this?
on the slides, there was a little link.
Mm,
We're half slide. Yeah, altcontrols.info, a very nice short URL, just happens to have a lot of useful information about making alt control games. But a lot of times it boils down to like you gotta get the you have a physical interaction that you're trying to get a computer to detect. And so that's step one, right? You figure out what you want the computer to see, and then you figure out how it's gonna see it. Most of the time, that boils down to like using Arduino or something, which is a microcontroller, and like slapping a button or something onto the your shovel or
hmm
whatever you like. But there are many other ways of going of kind of approaching this. So um, you could hack an existing controller. That's always a nice one because it's probably more reliable than an Arduino. So if you can take an existing controller and see how you can get a shovel to kind of press a button on it, that's one way as well.
Yeah.
In
I
the case
remember
for
playing a barkeeping game at Alt Control GTC and picking it up too hard, and a Wiimote fell out the bottom of it, and it was clear that that's how they
yeah,
achieved it.
in the case of sorry, in the case of the golf ball game, I believe what they had was a kind of they had I believe they had brake beams or like
Mm.
basically IR distance sensors, but at where you're shoveling it in. So when you shoveled something in, it would break the beam, and therefore they knew that you sent in a golf ball,
Right.
and then the golf ball just rolled back out the front, so you could shovel them endlessly.
Right.
It's really really smart.
Excellent. Cool. I'm glad you had that link there. So there you go. That's where people can find out more. Excellent. Yeah, I'm excited. I'd love to see more roguelikes uh, playing with these ideas. So thank you so much for joining us. And I hope
Thank you
you
for
can go to
having
bed because it's past midnight.
me.
Cool. All right. Thank you.